Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the retrograde of Mercury. So Mercury is going to station retrograde on the 26th of November 2024. It will station retrograde at 22 degrees and 40 minutes of the sign Sagittarius. It will come to the midpoint of the retrograde on the 6th of December, and then it will station direct on the 15th of December 2024 at 6 degrees and 23 minutes of the sign Sagittarius. And just so that you are also aware of the shadow zone, Mercury entered the shadow zone on the 7th of November, and it will exit the shadow zone on the 3rd of January 2025. So the full retrograde cycle will actually take us from the 7th of November, which we are already past. I'm recording this on the 21st of November, through to the 3rd of January 2025. We do tend to focus, though, on the actual retrograde, because this is the time when our cosmic messenger is retracing his steps. And for this retrograde, the fact that it's going to be in Sagittarius, this is going to accentuate perhaps some of the more scattered elements that we can feel when Mercury is going retrograde. We do tend to have a lot of scare stories when Mercury is retrograde. Don't do this, don't do that, don't sign this, don't do anything, don't decide anything, and definitely don't buy a new computer. And some of that is perhaps warranted in the sense that whatever tends to be decided or bought or, signed on the dotted line for during a retrograde, yes, sometimes we have to revisit that once Mercury goes direct again, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the world is going to fall apart. I'm an astrologer and I have bought a new computer when Mercury was retrograde. Now, it was a forced situation because my old computer had died and I can't do my work without a computer, so I had to go and buy one. And so, sometimes we need that energy of Mercury retrograde, even if we don't know why at the time. So it is important that we don't sort of freak out just because something is happening during a Mercury retrograde that is forcing us to make a decision of some kind. But with this retrograde being in Sagittarius, what I would always say is, if you can put off your decision until the retrograde is over, then do so. And if you can't, don't worry about it. Sagittarius energy, though, for Mercury is complex because this is the sign of its detriment. So it just means that it has to work harder in this sign to clarify things, because Sagittarius is very much about the big picture view. It is ruled by Jupiter, who just so happens to currently be in Mercury's sign over there in Gemini. And during this Mercury retrograde, they are going to oppose one another. So it's really kind of a strange picture, this, that both of these planets are in signs or places that are not easy for them. They're in each other's houses, we could say. They're in each other's houses, but they are kind of connected. They're phoning each other up saying, hey, where did you put the TV remote? How do I put the heating on? The shower's not working, or it seems to, be a bit weird. I can't get the hot water on. How do you do this? They can ring each other up. But with the opposition being in play whilst we're having this retrograde period, now we've got a bit of a sort of difficulty between the two of them. So they can call each other, but are they getting the right information? Or is Mercury just telling long stories before he gets to the point and tells Jupiter how to turn the heating on? Maybe there is also something here about our judgment being off as well, because Mercury is the mind, and then Jupiter has the overview from being a sky god. But something here is not translating. In fact, Mercury-Jupiter aspects can speak to learning different languages and being a polyglot, especially with Mercury up there in Sagittarius. So yeah, maybe this is like garbled communications. It interests me actually that just as Mercury and Jupiter were coming into an opposition, this is on the 18th of November, there was a story that came out about a data communication cable that has been broken. It's a connection between Finland and Germany. And there's actually talk of whether it might have actually been sabotaged, because it just so happens that it runs really close to the gas pipelines, the Nord Stream gas pipelines that run between Russia and Germany. And those were sabotaged before. So it kind of feels like there's possibly a bit of nefarious stuff going on underwater, which is interesting because Mercury will also square Saturn over there in Pisces during this retrograde period. But then we've also got this story about the data communication. So carrying lots of data and cables that connect countries internationally. I mean, this is definitely Mercury-Jupiter territory. But in our own lives, I'm wondering whether we do have something about getting lost in translation. You're trying to understand something, but you're not quite getting it because the words aren't right, the thoughts aren't right, the information isn't right, the translation is incorrect. So we're going to have some issues during Mercury retrograde where something is perhaps misunderstood, and we do need to clarify our thinking, something that is always the case when Mercury is retrograde, of course, because we are having to go back over our ideas. With Mercury being retrograde in Sagittarius, we're having to review our big picture thinking. We're having to look at, what is my philosophy? What do I believe about the world? What is my vision going forwards? What am I thinking about when I think ahead? How do I conceive of that? What do I know about that? So we're having to reflect upon what we see for our lives, ourselves, and also how we see the world, because that is part of Sagittarius. This very fiery, flexible, mutable energy is all connected with how we envisage ourselves and how we see the world. So with Mercury retrograde in this sign, then yes, some of our beliefs are going to be challenged, especially with the opposition to Jupiter during this period, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So Mercury will station retrograde on the Sabian Symbol, a group of immigrants as they fulfill the requirements of entrance into the new country. Clearly, this is a pretty hot topic. It's a hot topic in the UK, and I'd wager it's even a hotter topic in the US, given the election results and some of the promises that have been made by Trump. So the group of immigrants, as they fulfill the requirements of entrance into the new country, certainly is going to suggest that for a sort of global levels, it is the immigration story that is going to be capturing a lot of the headlines, a lot of the attention. But symbolically speaking, it tells us that something to do with this retrograde period is going to give us access to this unknown country within ourselves, this unknown place within ourselves. But the point is, it's hard to understand. So here, once again, we have the reference to a foreign language. Are you speaking my language? Are you hearing me? Do you understand me? There's no point just shouting if someone doesn't understand. I actually had a really funny situation the other day that I was walking around the park. It was late one afternoon, almost getting dark, and it had been raining. So one of the paths in particular is quite slippery. And because I still have a problem walking on one side, it was actually quite difficult for me to be able to negotiate this path, and it was making me limp more than I usually do. And there was a lady who was completely veiled, a Muslim lady, an elderly lady, who was also doing her walks and doing her laps. And I was busy concentrating on trying to not fall over on this slippery path. And eventually, after the third time, she kind of tapped me and stopped. And then she started to speak to me, but she was speaking to me in Arabic. And obviously, I don't speak Arabic, so I had no clue whatsoever what she was saying. But after a while, I realized she was sort of referring to my limp, and she was trying, I think, to tell me something about maybe she'd had her knee replaced or something about her knees. And so we were both trying to understand one another. And we just ended up laughing because, that was the one way we could connect. And then finally, she said a word at the end, and she said it twice. And I thought, gosh, that it feels like right from the heart. Whatever that means, it feels right from the heart. And I remembered the words, and I came home and spoke it into my phone. I hadn't taken my phone with me that day, so I spoke it into my phone, and it was thank you. And I was just like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like how this word, even though I didn't understand it, somehow translated that heartfelt feeling. I wish I could remember it now. It's gone out of my mind. So, and I'm busy recording, and I don't want to stop to look up the translation again and find out what that word was, because I probably wouldn't be able to pronounce it now because I'd only just heard it then. So that just gives you a sort of example of how amazing it can be that even when we don't understand one another's language, that on some level we can communicate with each other. So maybe this is the point, that we need to listen really carefully, and we need to listen with the heart. That's why this happened. I'm just getting a message from Spirit saying this is why you were being shown this, because that's what we need to do during this retrograde period. We need to communicate from the heart, and we need to listen from the heart. So moving forwards from the 26th of November, Mercury stations retrograde, 22 Sagittarius. On the 2nd of December, Mercury will then trine Chiron. So here we have the potential for a healing conversation. We also might be looking at mental health as well, because the beliefs that we hold can also affect how we feel as far as our mental health is concerned. The 4th of December is when we have Mercury's opposition to Jupiter once again. So this is even more important than to listen with the heart, to try to figure out what is being said or what kind of information is coming through. Be conscious that perhaps this is a time of feeling very overwhelmed. We can get mental overwhelm with Mercury opposite to Jupiter. And also be very cautious about saying yes to everything. Sometimes I have a lovely Gemini friend who can say sort of yes to everything that sounds really good at the time, and then he'll be like, oh God, I'm really, really overbooked with all different things. So Mercury opposite Jupiter can sometimes sort of translate into this kind of problem, that we can overextend ourselves and say yes to everything because everything looks good or everything feels like it's an opportunity that we don't want to miss, because Jupiter tends to bring us opportunities. On the 6th of December, this is when we have the midpoint of the retrograde period. It happens at 14 degrees and 27 minutes of the sign Sagittarius, and 14 degrees 18 minutes is the position of the Great Attractor. So we're going to have the Sun conjunct Mercury, also conjunct the Great Attractor on that very same degree. Now, I wrote a little article about the interesting sort of anomalies that we can use in astrology over on my Patreon. And one of the things that I said about the Great Attractor is that it pulls things into place, because the Great Attractor is a kind of gravitational anomaly in space. It's thought of as being the apparent center of a supercluster. And so it is somehow pulling us and everything towards it. But there's an area which they call the zone of avoidance, which is full of all sort of gases and dust. And so we can't really see exactly what is happening and why. We just know that everything, including light, is being drawn towards this point. And so this is why when it comes up in astrology, such as with this conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, the point when Mercury is Cazimi and receiving messages from Source to bring down to us, we've got some really big message coming through here, that the universe is trying to pull things into line, to pull us into line. And maybe we receive some kind of clairvoyant or clairsentient, clairaudient message around this time. We get a tiny glimpse of that much bigger picture, but it's only one little tiny piece. So maybe the point is that we shouldn't judge just taking that one tiny piece of information that we've got. We just need to focus on that instead of worrying about how it fits in with everything else. Because with this in play, this Great Attractor in play, it's like we can't possibly understand exactly how this is all playing out, because it's too big. It's too big. Maybe that's the problem for all of us right now, even before we get into this retrograde period. It feels like a lot of the stuff that's being discussed is just too big for us to be able to truly comprehend. So perhaps then we can rest easy in the knowledge that it's like the universe knows, the gods know, and they're giving us little pieces of information when we need it. You know, sometimes it's a case of a need to know basis. And so it's almost like the universe is saying to us, when you need to know, you'll know. If you don't know yet, don't worry about it. That's how this conjunction feels, being on this Great Attractor. On the 7th of December, we're then going to have that square to Saturn that I mentioned. So the Sun and Mercury are still going to be pretty close together. We'll get Mercury square to Saturn. So this is perhaps the block, but maybe also it is the push to create some kind of definition. There is also the push to be realistic, to be accountable, to be responsible, have a responsible mindset, to speak with maturity, and to be cautious and careful in how we speak to one another, including how we speak to ourselves. Saturn is in Pisces, a sign that's associated with compassion. And then on the 13th of December, Mercury will sextile Venus. So now we're getting this feeling that we've got the heart and the mind finally connected. Again, that story I began with, the listening from the heart, speaking from the heart. Now we have the invitation to connect these two with Mercury sextile to Venus. And once that is done, Mercury then stations direct. And this is on the 15th of December at 6 degrees, 23 minutes of Sagittarius. And I've just looked up the symbol. I hadn't looked it up before, and I'm amazed. It's Cupid knocks at the door of the human heart. How utterly perfect. And what a story as well, with the idea of the immigrants coming into the country, and then the invitation to open one's heart. And maybe this is the point, that, you know, we all speak different languages. We're all coming from a different place, metaphorically and literally. And yet the push is to open the heart. Like me and the elderly Muslim lady, walking in different directions, but on the same path. We had a moment where we met and we tried to communicate something to one another, but the only thing that we really, really understood was thank you. This concludes my reading for Mercury Retrograde in Sagittarius for November 2024. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. And if you would like to hear more from me, I do have a Substack, Patreon, website. I will drop all those links below, including my social media where I post daily. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.